A very good morning to one and all listening to online lectures on the course titled Soft Skills. Presently, we are dealing with advanced speaking skills. All of you might recollect that in the previous lectures, we have talked about oral presentations, speeches and debates, their differences. And we also talked about nervousness. Most of us, while we are asked to give a presentation or a speech, feel nervous. In the previous talk, we discussed why do we feel nervous? What is it that makes us nervous? There are different reasons because of which most of us become nervous, and one such reason is unfamiliarity. Unfamiliarity with the topic, unfamiliarity with the crowd, and as a result, we actually lose confidence. When you are nervous, you are low from the point of view of your confidence level, but at the same time, you, in moments of nervousness, you are overconscious. Now, in order that we can overcome our nervousness, there are certain things that we do. First of all, you become nervous because you feel something bad will happen, and nervousness brings all sorts of fears and all sorts of frights. So, in order to combat nervousness, it is better, as I said the other day, preparation is the best antidote. It is actually the best way to fight nervousness, because as psychologists have said, nervousness is a situation of fighting or to flight. When you feel nervous, you either want to flee away from the spot, from the scene, but then we can always work hard so that the situation of nervousness can be fought better. Today, we are going to talk about how, in order to fight nervousness, we should better be prepared. And in order to be prepared, we actually have to know how we can try our level best so that we may get prepared. Now, this preparation actually has several stages. I often keep saying that any speech or any presentation is actually based on 5 P's. 5 P's. And so here, today we are going to talk about the pattern and method of preparation, method of presentation. I mean, a person who is best prepared will be able to fight nervousness in a better way than one who is not prepared. Now, for any presentation or any speech, we have to, as I said earlier, beware of 5 P's. What are these 5 P's? The first is preparation, planning, practice, pattern, and performance. So, today we are going to talk about the very first thing as to when you go to prepare your presentation, you ought to understand what are the different patterns of presentation, because every presentation, every speech will have three stages. First is pre-presentation, the second will be during presentation, and the third is post presentation or performance, post preparation or performance. So, we shall be talking about the patterns. So, when you are going to give a presentation, you must understand how should you prepare your presentation, and in order to prepare your presentation you actually need to understand the different patterns, because every presentation involves a lot of consideration, lot of tasks. As I said the other day also, what you see is only the outside. Inside or behind the screen there are so many things to do. So, first let us try to understand, when we are going to draft or present your presentation or speech, here we shall be using both these terms interchangeably because so many of the processes are the same. Now, what are the pattern? The first pattern is that of a chronological pattern. Chronological. Now, what do we mean by this chronological pattern? Chronology. Now, when you actually decide about the topic, you also can come to a situation where you will find to which category your presentation or your speech will belong. So, the first is chronological pattern. In a chronological pattern, you base your presentation in a sort of chronology, I mean in a sort of time sequence. Say for example, somebody has to give a presentation on civilization, somebody has to give a presentation say on a topic where he has also to relate it to time sequence. This presentation will come under the category of time and event. So, it will appear like a sort of historical events, and of course in such a presentation the way you write, you will be describing it chronologically. That is why this is called chronological presentation or chronological speech. Next is a causal one, a causal pattern. Now, this pattern weaves the presentation or the speech in a cause and effect relationship. You talk about the cause in the first, and then second you talk about the effect, and this is called causal pattern of presentation or cause effect relationship. Say for example, if somebody gives a presentation on the ways to evade nervousness, as I have been saying, so first somebody will talk about the causes of nervousness, the reasons of nervousness, and then they will also talk about the effect. For example, when somebody is nervous, one loses one's confidence, one forgets and one hesitates, the movements become slow. So, it is actually such a presentation is pattern on the basis of cause and effect relationship. The next is a problem solution, one where in the first instance you talk about the problem. Say for example, you are going to give a presentation on deforestation. Now, when you talk about deforestation, you will be talking about what is deforestation, and then you will also talk about how it has become a danger to human life. You can also give a presentation on soil erosion, you can give a presentation on pollution, you can give a presentation on global warming. Now, all these are based on problem solution pattern. You will be talking about the problem, and then you will also talk about the solution, and you will find in such a situation you are able to keep your audience intact. It is also very much like cause and effect, but here in one instance you are talking about the problem, but then you are also giving them a sort of solution, whereas when you are giving a causal pattern, you are actually presenting the problem. Maybe you are not talking about the solution, but then when you are talking about a problem solution pattern, you are not only presenting the problem, but you are also offering solution. So, this may be, while the first can be a sort of informative presentation, the second or the problem solution can be a sort of persuasive presentation. Then we can also give a presentation, because when you give a presentation there are certain limitations, as I discussed the other day also. When you give a presentation you have certain limitations, because you give presentation on technical aspects. So, sometimes you may be talking about the design of a new product or so. In such a situation you actually pattern your presentation in a spatial pattern. Spatial, as the term itself says, it will talk about the space, it will talk about the direction, and then maybe you are discussing the design aspect, and hence your presentation will be patterned into the spatial pattern of presentation. And the last presentation, which most of us, even the common people, they can give, it is called a topical pattern, where you have a lot of information and you are going to divide this information into topics and subtopics, and you present this information to your audience. Now, it is up to you, and it is actually on the basis of the topic and the information that you can pattern your presentation, either in a chronological pattern or in a causal pattern or problem solution pattern, spatial pattern or topical one. When you are not able to categorize your presentation into all the four, the easiest one is the topical one. It is now for you to decide what sort of presentation you are going to give and how you will categorize them. But knowing only the pattern of presentation will not do. Suppose you have patterned your presentation and now you have to deliver the presentation, but before delivery, as I said, you actually have to prepare the presentation. So, when you prepare the presentation, or I mean write the presentation, you also have to think about the various requirements of various presentations. For example, there are different methods, and for every method you can apply a different method. Now, what are these methods? What are these methods of presentation? There are 4 methods of presentation, and we shall be talking about them one by one. Now, suppose you have been called or you have been invited to deliver a presentation or a speech. You have also been given the topic. Now, as I said the earlier day, while you were gathering information about the presentation, and you have gathered the presentation information, you are thinking of the method, because whether it is a presentation or a speech, you are to speak. So, if you are going to speak, you have to write your presentation in the same manner, because inexperienced speakers, new people, those who have started, for them it is very difficult to give a perfect presentation. Even you know that when we talk about perfection, let us say perfection is only a misnomer. No one is perfect. Even expert speakers, they also feel that they cannot be perfect. So what about you? So for you it is better, while you are drafting your presentation, you are writing your presentation, you should know how to draft it depending upon your ability. And the easiest one is what? The easiest one is you will write a presentation, isn't it? You might have seen many people writing their presentation, and the written presentation they actually carry and they read it, reading from manuscript. Now, what is this reading from manuscript? You see, all of us want to be appreciated, and you put all your efforts when you are writing your presentation. So while writing, you want that you should not only choose good words, effective words, meaningful words and sentences, but then you also want that it should be delivered. So when you think about this presentation to be delivered to the crowd, you also have to think which way you can do better. And so the easiest, according to you, not according to me, is reading from manuscript. Now, in such a presentation, what a person does is he has the text or the content, the manuscript, and when he goes to give the presentation, he will read it. He will read it for the people, for the audience. Now, imagine if you keep yourself in the position of your listeners, how will you react if somebody comes with a textual presentation and he reads it? Can you imagine the effect? Now the effect is that while the person reads the presentation, he has several challenges. Now, even though this presentation appears very interesting because it is written with much effort, much care, much preparation, carefully drafted words, phrases, sentences and quotes and all, but then you want to read it. Now the problem is, on a technical subject it is okay, because people want information, and they want information which can be accurate, which, suppose you are giving a presentation where a lot of data is involved, naturally you would like to see from the text which is there. Now what are the requirements of such a presentation? Such a presentation is very challenging. Challenging why? Because you have certain limitations, my dear friend. The limitation is that you have to be very much accurate, very much accurate. Can you be accurate? Now this accuracy level, since you have to accurate, you will read from the text, and while reading, throughout you will be with the text, and there are chances that you may not be able to look at the audience. Now what will happen? I have been saying that for a good presentation there has to be a very good rapport with the crowd and the speaker. As a speaker, if you are reading this presentation from the manuscript, what happens? You want to read everything to the core. You want to read word by word, You want to read verbatim, even because the subject is complex and you do not want your listeners to have a false information. You want them to have accurate information. But then the organizers have given you only 20 minutes of time or 15 minutes of time. So this Damocles sword is hanging on you. You want to finish this presentation, say, in 20 minutes, and you are not able to because you have certain limitations. You cannot be spontaneous. In order to be spontaneous, you have to look at the crowd, and you are not that expert that you will both be looking into your text and then looking at. From speaker's point of view, again you have a problem. You are not able to lift your eyes, my dear friend, and when you do not lift your eyes and look at your crowd, what will the impact be? Will you be able to create a rapport? Not at all. So there are certain limitations. You cannot lift your eye, and moreover, because you are reading, you are not bothered whether the words are coming clearly, whether the pauses are coming, whether you have been able to divide perfectly your sentences, whether the meaning accrues from the way you are reading. For this, one has to be a practiced reader, which you cannot be when you give a presentation from the manuscript. Moreover, you will also find that not only is it difficult to establish the rapport, you will have no control over the crowd. And you might have often felt, even being a spectator or a listener or an audience members, that if the speaker is reading from the text, even the audience are not that much interested, barring a few, because they feel you are not looking at them, how extra care they took to come here with all sorts of preparation, and you are not casting even a glance at them. How poor, what a pity. Now such a presentation also gives you some strain as a speaker. Your eyes, because they are continuously glued to the text, there is a problem that you are not able to have an eye relief, and there can be strain. Moreover, you have less opportunity to provide the vocal variety. When we are giving the presentation, speaking, as I said in one of the lectures, has an advantage that it has a sort of spontaneity. The way a person speaks, the way a person modulates, the way a person provides intonation, the way he brings certain ups and rises in his voices, and the way he stops, the way he pauses, all these are not possible in such a presentation. And so what will happen? This presentation, this method of preparing a presentation with the help of manuscript is not advisable, especially for new people, for inexperienced people. So the first method is reading from the manuscript. Okay. So if reading fails, what do? You think, let me memorize my presentation, isn't it? So you start feeling that you can give a better presentation by memorizing, and then the debate comes into picture. You are reminded of the way you could have created a sort of rapport with the crowd by looking at the crowd, and for that, according to you, the best way is to memorize. So another method of presentation, dear friends, is memorization. So you will find when a presentation is memorized, it looks fresh, because the speaker, he has memorized. Now the question is, can you memorize everything? You can memorize words, you can memorize sentences, but then can you also memorize how you will bring a shift in your voice? Can you also memorize where to stop? Can you also memorize where to be silent? Can you also memorize where to give some pauses? Or can you also memorize how to bring transitions in your sentences or in your patterns of thought? So memorized is good, effective, attractive, provided you have been able to memorize everything. But again, the problem is they have provided you 15 minutes and you are not aware of the speed that you will provide to a memorized presentation, because when you memorize a presentation you want to give the best that you can, and as a youngster you think you want to blow your own trumpet by being as fiery as you can. And the problem is, what if you finish before time? Again there is problem that people will be thinking that you had too less material, audience will be thinking, and they realize also, audience members are not fools, they are wiser than you, so they know that it is a memorized presentation and the speaker does not have any role. Here you are just like a robot, you are simply looking at them and your vocal machine is on a spree to deliver. But the problem again is, suppose you miss a particular segment, my dear friend, suppose you forget a particular phrase or a particular quote, what will happen? Who will come to your help? The entire memorization process will come to a halt and you will again feel yourself becoming a butt of laughter. You will be struggling for words, you will be struggling for the quote that was very relevant, for you will again be thinking of the strand of thought that was there. Missing one sentence or one unit, one phrase, one thread of thought is dangerous in a memorized presentation. Then of course many listeners will feel a sort of delight, but the delight cannot continue for long, because the delight will turn into despair the moment the speaker forgets. And it is a fact that whatever you memorize, you are a human being, you are bound to forget. So when you are giving a memorized presentation or a memorized method you are adopting, not only the question of preparing such a presentation is very difficult, but it is also very difficult to continue with this presentation. Now, if reading from the manuscript is not feasible from your point of view, a memorized method is also not good, then what? Then comes another one, and that is impromptu. Now, what is impromptu method of presentation? In an impromptu method of presentation, now in impromptu method of presentation, there is no preparation. No preparation. It is unprepared, isn't it? Now, you also might have come across several situations where without any pre-information, your name is announced and you have to speak. Is it not challenging? Of course, it is even more challenging than reading from the manuscript and from the memorized version. But if it is challenging, it is also very much rewarding, because such a presentation is given on the spot, it is given on the spur of the moment. Now in such a situation, how should the speaker, because here you do not have time to prepare, and for this you can never anticipate when that time will come. So for all of you, my dear friends, this situation may come any moment, so you have to be prepared for such a situation any moment, and for this you should always be prepared. Now again you can say, how can we be prepared? No, it is not the time to get prepared. All your past preparations, all your past readings, all your past experiences, all your past ideas, all your past observations, they actually come to your help in an impromptu presentation. The speaker has to rely on his previous knowledge, whatever he has read, and the topics that they will give. Now again I will repeat what Shakespeare says, it is best to speak few than to speak more. Now in such a situation, I mean, whatever little you might be knowing, my dear friend, it is not that you do not know anything. A particular word that will actually remind you a lot of experiences which you had come across. So relate it to your experience, take some time, and a small, a jiffy of the second can get you reminded of whatever you know. So speak. In such a situation you have to speak. But what can save you? What can save you is not to speak for a long time. Be brief, be to the point. You should always continue. Even now when you are listening to me, you should start thinking that any moment you may be asked to give a presentation. So keep on anticipating, and when you keep on anticipating, when you keep on visualizing, things will become very easier. Dear friends, there is nothing good or bad in this world. It is actually the thinking which makes it so, says William Shakespeare. So if you start thinking like this, because you have got the voice, you have got the caliber, you can do wonders. So be brief, and when you feel that you are now running sort of ideas in an impromptu situation, it is better to summarize. When you summarize, when you start summarizing, maybe some new things will come, but stop the temptation, resist the temptation. It is always better to be silent when you have nothing to say. So this impromptu method of presentation is more challenging, but it is also more rewarding. An impromptu situation do not come by giving any announcement, it may come any moment. So get prepared for all this and nothing bad will happen, you will always be better. And the last method of presentation is extemporaneous. Now in such a method of presentation, you will find here also it is unprepared, but then there is a flexibility in it. It is unprepared, but prepared in a different manner. You have full liberty, you do not have time limit, fine. But even if there is a time limit, you can prepare your presentation at your leisure and at your own pleasure. So what you can do is, in such a situation or for such a method of presentation, you always should prepare more material than required. And since such a presentation has got a lot of flexibility, in such a situation you are going to speak with notes, sometimes with slides, sometimes with the help of some other visual aids. So, and you have a sort of conversation with your audience. In such a situation, you can converse, you can speak with your audience. It is not that it will be so organized, but audience love to have a sort of presentation where there is lot of interaction. So you can go for such a presentation, but then because you can well gauge the mood of the audience by looking at their faces, by looking at their eyes. So if you feel that there is some amount of boredom or ennui, you can of course cut, you can of course squeeze, you can of course skip some of the points. The audience will not feel like you are doing that, because such a presentation can only be given by a person who has got a lot of understanding and who has got a sort of expertise over his subject. But remember, in order to do justice with this presentation, it is better if you can go with an outline, if you have simply to speak. And when you prepare the outline in such a manner that you are able to understand and you are able to skip. So have an outline ready, and please, because in such a in such a method of presentation you feel that you have a lot of flexibility, so you allow this flexibility to understand the mood of the audience. And if you feel that they are not with you or they are feeling restless, please have some empathy for listeners, and then you can wind up. But while you wind up, you know better how you can create, because it is all with language. It is all with language. And even though you are speaking in a very interactive manner, in a very interactive method, but that has to be written. I am not talking about the delivery part now. I am simply talking about the preparation. So the way you prepare your presentation or your speech, you make it conversational, no doubt, but think that a speech or a presentation is not a conversation, as we can quote from what a famous speech therapist or a speech teacher says. It is not true that a public speech to be conversational need sound like a conversation. Though it may appear like a conversation, but it is not a conversation. Conventional differences may make it sound very different. My dear friends, we have talked about the different patterns and methods of presentation so that you feel yourself to be in a better frame of mind to draft your presentation. Once you know these methods, once you know these patterns, the time has come that you should know how to make preparations, because information you have, methods you know, patterns you know. Now is the time that you will plan your presentation, because when you have information, the information has to be conveyed, has to be given, has to be spoken. And if it is spoken in the right manner, with the right spirit, you will become a successful speaker. Dear friends, we close this lecture, and in the next lecture we shall be talking about the planning, and then we'll see how we can organize our presentation. Thank you very much.